trying to engage you in conversation and you don't want that conversation, don't just stand there and try to pretend like he's not still standing next to you. Put some distance between you.
Do they have to identify themselves?
They don't, especially if they're undercover. Police officers are allowed to lie in order to investigate crimes. The example I give is if, an undercover drug cop has infiltrated a drug cartel and you ask them, are you a cop? They certainly don't have to tell you. And they do not have to identify themselves. If they're in uniform, though, they are supposed to be wearing a badge and so that it shows their agency as well as their name. If you ever see a police officer with their name covered up with duct tape or something, is often the case, that is actually strictly against police policy, and the only reason a police officer would do that is because he himself is likely breaking the law. You should probably try to photograph that, and we can deal with it afterward. In legal land, silence means agreement. If the police ask me to search my backpack and I stand there like a deer in the headlights, I am literally saying, yes, officer, search my backpack. You have to say, make your consent known in words. Don't shake your head or shrug your shoulders, say, I don't consent to this search, or whatever it is that's happening to you. So the next level is detention. The police can detain you if they think that you have committed a crime or are about to commit a crime. That means that they are legally allowed to make you stay there while they investigate whether or not you actually have committed a crime or not. They have to be able to tell you what the reasonable suspicion is that they have that you've committed a crime or are about to commit a crime. If you're being detained, then you have to give them 3 pieces of information. If you're being detained, in Oregon, we never have to produce identification unless we are the driver of a vehicle. So often if you're being detained, the police will say, let me see your ID. You don't have to show them your ID, but you have to tell them your name, date of birth, and address. If you choose not to give them your ID, you should probably proactively give them your name, date of birth, or address. If you don't, they are allowed to take you into custody just for the purposes of identifying you. So they take you down to the pokey, they run your fingerprints, and they come up with your identity. So we'll talk about these magic words that we want you to say so that you can figure out which of these stages you're in. But basically, if a police officer says, hold on, I want to ask you a few questions, we're going to train you tonight to say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? This is a yes or no question. Am I being detained? Yes or no? If it's yes, that means they are investigating you for a crime, and you should probably assert your Fifth Amendment rights. If they say no, that means you're at that conversation stage, and you should say, I choose not to speak with you, and slowly walk away. And we'll kind of go over this a couple times throughout the night. If you are stopped by the police, first thing you should do is take a deep breath. Focus, be calm. You never want to run or physically resist, even if you think what they're doing is illegal. They will only add charges to you and probably injure you as well. And like I said, basically you just want to ask, am I free to leave? And do so accordingly. We're not really going to focus tonight on motor vehicles because that's really not the focus of tonight's training, but there are some different, obviously if you're a driver of a motor vehicle, you've got to produce a driver's license. So there's some slight differences there. Like I said, you got to give them your address, your name, and your date of birth. It is a crime to give a false name, and that includes a pseudonym. If for the purpose of Occupy Eugene, your name is now going to be Ground Squirrel, if you give that to the police, that is giving false information to a police officer and can be a separate crime. If you are being detained, the police are allowed to do what's called a pat-down search. This means they're allowed to pat the outside of your clothing, and they are only looking, or supposed to be looking, for weapons that you could use to injure them. This is an officer safety search only. But if you are carrying a backpack, they may be allowed to open the backpack or anything within your wingspan, and again, only looking for weapons. If you are detained, we ask that you write down everything you can remember as soon as possible, especially if you end up going to jail. This can be important information for your lawyer. Police can lie, like I mentioned. They can promise that if you give them information, they won't arrest you. They can promise that they will not charge you with certain things. None of it is enforceable. The police can make you all the promises in the world and they don't have to ever act upon them. And you will not have any witnesses other than police officers to what's happening. And again, regardless of what they promise you, there is no way that you can enforce it. If you are detained by the police, they are not allowed to move you at that stage. So if they, say, why don't you come down this dark alley, we'd like to ask you a few questions, you are allowed to say, actually, I'd rather stay here amongst all of my people with witnesses. If you are under arrest, if they place you under arrest and the handcuffs go on, obviously then they're allowed to walk you to the police car and take you to jail. But until you're actually placed under arrest, you don't have to go anywhere with them. And as we will drill into your heads tonight, if you're arrested, you want to immediately ask for a lawyer and assert those Fifth Amendment rights. If you're under 18, you have all the same rights as what we're talking about tonight. Identical. But one difference is if a teen is arrested, if you're under 18 and you're arrested and you go to jail, if you're over 18, you can be released on your own recognizance. That means that they let you out without paying bail. The door just swings open. If you're under 18, your parent or guardian has to physically come to the jail and pick you up. So if you know of any out-of-town teens coming to Occupy Eugene, make sure that some kind of permission slip is negotiated for them so that a friend, an adult friend, could potentially get them out of jail if need be. In protest scenarios, if you were to be arrested, if you choose to be arrested, it's likely going to be for a misdemeanor. In Lane County Jail, because we have such an overcrowded jail, most people who are arrested for a misdemeanor will be out of custody in about 6 hours. Because they're nonviolent offenses, you're the first to be let out of jail. So it's very unlikely that anyone who would be arrested in Eugene would really even spend the night in jail. But at most, in Oregon, you have to go in front of a judge and be arraigned within 48 hours. So within 2 days, you have to be brought in front of a judge. You might be, qualified for a court-appointed lawyer, and you can deal with a release issue at that point, in the worst-case scenario. If you are injured during your arrest, or if you have an injury pre-existing, you need to be a very squeaky wheel. You need to tell the jailers over and over again what your needs are. If you have a medical condition like diabetes or something where you have required medications, think twice before purposefully putting yourself in an arrest scenario. Even if you had your medication in your pocket, the jail is not allowed to give it to you. They have to get it to come in through a pharmacy because it might be LSD or something in their minds. So if you have a medical condition, as soon as you get arrested, you need to start demanding your needs, medically speaking. And ideally, if you've got it, especially if you are going to choicefully get arrested, you may want to have a copy of your prescription in your pocket at the time of arrest so that the jail medical staff can then obtain your medications for you as soon as possible. Like I said, it's really unlikely anybody would even spend the night, and if you've got a medical condition, you're probably going to be first in line to get out because they don't want to deal with you. But just so you know that that's the situation.
Will you be allowed